I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is there any declaration? Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong agenda here. Adoption of agendas, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kenny. The council adopt the agendas as published on December 12th, 2019, and any and all revisions published December 17th, 2019.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Mayor's remarks. On November 26, Councillor Neal, Councillor Sentence, and I attended the Thorold Community Leaders Prayer Breakfast, Partnering for a Better Thorold at Club Capri, hosted by One Church Thorold. On November 27th, CAO Manoj Dalwaria, Councillor Neal, and I attended the Niagara Community Foundation 18th Annual Niagara Leaders Breakfast. Also on the 27th, First Ontario Credit Union hosted a Lunch and Learn for the Niagara Board of Trade and Commerce. Councillor Neal, CAO Manoj Dalwaria, and I attended that session. Later that day, I attended a community consultation session regarding the Upper Lane Quarry hosted by Walker Industries at the Beechwood Golf and Country Club. December 8th, I attended the Senior Center Holiday Dinner at the Canadian Corps. On December 10th, I attended the Niagara Board of Trade and Commerce, Thorold BIA, and Thorold Tourism annual Christmas social downtown at Donnelly's Pub with Councillor Neal, Councillor Decker, Councillor Sentence, and CAO Manoj Dalwaria. December 16th, I attended the official groundbreaking ceremony to celebrate the start of construction of the Canada Games Park, a partnership between Niagara 2021 Canada Summer Games, Niagara Region, Brock University, City of St. Catharines, and City of Thorold. CAO Manoj Dalwaria, Councillor Neal, Councillor Sentence, Councillor Kenny, and Councillor Wilson were also in attendance. On behalf of City Council, staff, and our residents, I would like to thank the dedicated volunteers that helped organize this year's Santa Claus Parade. It was another great success and a huge hit with the community. I would like to thank everyone who helped support the City of Thorold's annual holiday food drive and toolbox project. Now more than ever, donations are greatly needed and appreciated. Dog owners, this is a reminder, 2020 dog licenses are available for purchase at thorold.docupet.com. Purchase your license before December 31st of this year to avoid late registration fees. Please join Council and myself for our free Mayor and Council skate on this Sunday, December 22nd from 10 to 1 at the Thorold Community Arena. On this day, there's going to be a free skate, and as well, the Thorold Mounts are going to be providing a free barbecue and a visit from Santa Claus. So everybody come out this Sunday from 10 to 1 o'clock at the Doherty Arena. It should be a great day. Please be advised that Thorold City Hall will be closed from Tuesday, December 24th through Wednesday, January 1st for the holidays. Regular hours will resume on Thursday, January 2nd, 2020. This will be our last council meeting of the year, so on behalf of City Council and staff, I would like to wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and have a safe and happy New Year. Enjoy the time with family and friends, and we will see you all in 2020. Our next council meeting will be held Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. And that's the end of the mayor's report. Adoption of the minutes. Council and General Committee meeting minutes of December 3rd, 2019. Councillor Kenny.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Sentence, that the regular Council and General Committee meeting minutes of December 3rd, 2019 be hereby adopted.
Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll start with a public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. Proposed plan of subdivision and amendment to the City of Thorold Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2140(97) to subdivide and rezone lands legally described as part of Lot 67 and part of road allowance between Lots 67 and 68, City of Thorold, D12-01-2019, D1402-2019. Opening remarks and purpose of the meeting and intent of the proposed draft plan of subdivision zoning bylaw amendment. The public meeting is being held pursuant to the provisions of Sections 34 and 51 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended. The purpose and effect of the proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications are to rezone the subject lands from light industrial L1H zone to Rolling Meadows second density RMR2 zone, a site-specific Rolling Meadows second density RMR2X zone, Rolling Meadows third density RMR3 zone, to site-specific Rolling Meadows third density R3X zone and Rolling Meadows open space RMOS zone to permit single detached dwellings and street townhouses to be constructed on the subject lands. A sign-in sheet is located at the back if you wish to receive a copy of the decision of City Council. At the same table, copies of the staff report are available for your information, and I'd like to call up Denise Landry, Manager of Planning Services, to make the presentation from City staff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present this application. The sign-in sheet will be available shortly on the side. I asked Paul, our planner, to print me off one. So I'll be providing an overview of the two Planning Act applications. We've got a plan of subdivision as well as a rezoning application. The subject property is legally described as part of Lot 67 and part of road allowance between Lot 67 and 68, plan of subdivision and rezoning. The subject property is located in the community of Thorold South. It's beside the existing Rolling Meadows subdivision. The property is located north of Uppers Lane and east of Highway 20. So we've got Uppers Lane here, and Highway 20 here. Sorry, Highway 58. My apologies there. The property is currently vacant and it abuts residential uses to the west. The draft plan approved Rolling Meadows to the south, which would be here. Vacant land and wooded areas to the north and east, here and here. The property is designated as residential, open space and parks, and environmental protection 2 within the Rolling Meadows secondary plan and city's official plan. You will see in yellow is the residential designation. The green here, that's the environmental designation, and then there's some portions along here that are the open space designation. We've also got a little bit of green along the property line here and right along the southern property line. The lands are also within a greenfield overlay, and that's the hashed lines across the entire area. This means that a density of 50 people and jobs per hectare is required for any development. We also have an eco trail and a multi-use trail that also bisect the property. So we've got a trail here, as well as along the easement, the Trans-Canada Pipeway easement here. The Environmental Protection 2 designation is shown in green. The designation identifies a significant woodlot that is along here, and you can see the larger piece of the woodlot here to the east of the subject property. We also have two treed hedgerows that bisect the property, the one in the middle here, as well as one right along the southern property line. And there are also two water courses that are in blue on the image to the right. You can see the two water courses there. And they're regulated by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. The property in our zoning bylaw, it's currently zoned light industrial with a holding provision. So the plan of subdivision application is for 100 lots for single detached dwellings, and those are in the yellow, in the two different shades of yellow, and that just has to do with the size of the lots. So we got yellow here and down here. And 233 lots for street townhouse dwellings, and those are along here in this light blue color, as well as the pinky red color that you can see. 2 zoning bylaw amendments were prepared for the application. One for the in effect zoning bylaw, the 2140 1997 bylaw, as well as the new bylaw that was passed in May, bylaw 60 2019. And the applicant primarily proposes to use the existing zoning that's currently being used for the Rolling Meadows subdivision. A number of studies and plans were submitted with the application. We have an archaeological assessment, stages 1 through 4, and this is due to the proximity of the subject lands to a registered archaeological site and the watercourses on the property. There was a traffic impact study, a planning justification report, a functional servicing report that outlines the servicing and stormwater management strategy for the subdivision, environmental impact statement, and that assesses the potential impacts of the development on the natural heritage features and on the adjacent subject property. There was also a tree savings plan, as well as the draft plan that I just previously showed you, which identifies the lot fabric, streets, and the proposed land uses. Whoops. Yeah. Second last. I think I'm the only one that's had this issue. Staff circulated the application to internal departments as well as external agencies for review and comment. The NPCA and the region both reviewed the studies that are applicable to them. The main comments that they've identified were to do with the EIS in terms of the 2 regulated watercourses, as well as the significant woodlot. They had some amendments that they would like to address some issues within the EIS. The engineering department has also requested additional information related to the servicing of the development and also addressing stormwater management on site. Since these comments were received, the applicant has provided an addendum to the EIS to address the comments from the Conservation Authority as well as the region. And they've also provided an updated functional servicing report to address engineering's comments. So staff and agencies are in the process now of reviewing these documents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions for our manager of planning, Denise? Seeing none, I thank you for your presentation. Up next, presentation from applicant, the consultant. Could you please introduce yourself, please? Your name and company.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Michael Larkin. Representing the applicant Forest Building. I really don't have a lot to much to add. Thank you. Sorry, hopefully you were able to hear me. Saving a step that we're pleased to be continuing working with staff to address any comments received from the circulation of a technical nature. And I'm here to answer any questions or any responses required of items brought up by the members of public or council. Thank you. Thank you.
Public participation. A person or public body chooses to provide oral comments at the public meeting or written comments before the proposed draft plan of subdivision is approved and zoning bylaw amendment is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal. Now, at this time, is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Please come forward to the podium. Is there anyone at this time who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Please come forward to the podium. One last time, if there's anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of the application, please come forward to the podium. Seeing none, is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition of the application? Please come forward to the podium. Please state your name and title.
Good evening. My name is William Haikupa, planner with Upper Canada Consultants. I represent the Rolling Meadows Land Development Corporation. My client began working on creating a community back in 2001, which eventually became known as the Rolling Meadows, the Neighborhoods of the Rolling Meadows Secondary Plan. The approach to this project was to incorporate all of the properties in the area, not just the ones owned by Rolling Meadows. And this resulted in a well thought out community plan. My client owns the land that is generally in the center of this master planned area, with other property owners somewhat surrounding their holdings. It has always been the intention of Rolling Meadows to see this plan fully realized, with much of the building driven by themselves to date, but also strongly encouraging all the surrounding owners to develop as well. The application being considered this evening from Fars Holding Inc. is to the east of my client's properties and one of those properties that needs to be developed in order to complete this plan. In order to establish this new communities, Rolling Meadow was solely responsible for funding and building the major infrastructure to connect into the existing services in Thorold South. Some of these expenses have been or will be in the future repaid to my client from the development charges collected by the city. However, a large portion of these costs will not be repaid by the development charges collected. The funding of these works were debated more than a decade ago, and I believe several of the council members here this evening were also on council at that time. There was much discussion at that time as to whether Rolling Meadows should pay only to size infrastructure needed for its own land holdings, or if it should also pay to oversized components to allow future neighboring landowners to tap into that system. To help make a decision on this matter, the city at that time hired a consultant and later presented a development policy report. City Council followed the recommendations in the report and requested that Rolling Meadows pay for the extra infrastructure that would benefit other landowners in the area that were unwilling to make the contribution at that time. Council also supported that Rolling Meadows could be repaid when the other landowners came forward to develop their land. Fars Holdings has come forward this evening to develop their land. It is very concerning to my client that there hasn't been any discussions or even an inquiry by the applicant as to the amount of money owed for the infrastructure that was built on their land many years ago. To this effect, we consider the application premature. Upper Canada Consultants works with land developers on a daily basis to live throughout Niagara and beyond. The financial viability of a project is fundamental to every one of our clients. Any sincere developer seeks out the cost and understands the project's viability. This has not happened yet in this situation. Once again, we are asking your staff to find this application premature on the basis of the servicing plan that was provided to the applicant. We haven't had a chance to review the updated functional servicing report that may address some of the questions, and the disregard for council's decision to follow the development policy report as previously noted. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions for William? Seeing none, thank you very much, William. Now, at this time, is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition of the application? Please come forward to the podium. And one last time, is there anyone else present who wishes to speak in opposition of the application? Please come forward to the podium. Seeing none, closing remarks and closing of the meeting. This fulfills the requirements of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, pursuant to Sections 34 and 51. The city's general committee will consider staff's recommendation report, which will be subsequently considered by City Council at a future date. Anyone wishing to receive a copy of the City Council's decision as a result of this application is asked to submit the request in writing to the City Clerk. As such, the public meeting portion of this application is now closed. Presentations. We'll move on to presentations, and up first is Julian Bell, consultant with GM Blue Plan on the Citywide Water Service Master Plan. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just waiting for the presentation to come up here. No? Oh, sorry.
No, they're all dead.
We need him.
It's gonna be fun. Okay. All right, I think I'll get started now. So I'm here to talk about the citywide water servicing master plan. So this is the master plan. In its essence, is a long-term visioning and planning document that outlines the city's plan to manage its water system to support existing users and to support growth out to 2041 and beyond. Is it on? Sorry, I'll start over again. So here to talk about the citywide water master plan. And the intent of the master plan is essentially it's a visioning document that outlines the city's vision and management plan for its existing water infrastructure. And this process was done through the MEA Class EA process. So that process ensures two things. One, that it's the process of coming up with the plan is through a thoughtful analysis that looks at both technical and cost basis, but as well as environmental, social, cultural implications of the management strategy. And the second component is that the recommendations of the master servicing plan can be implemented directly without the need for additional environmental assessments, because it's done through that process. And that it outlines that the purpose of this master servicing plan is to come up with a visioning document that looks at multifaceted aspects of the city's water infrastructure. So looking at both the needs of existing users, growth needs, as well as operational flexibility, and then the long-term financial viability of the water infrastructure. Okay. This process was done, the master servicing plan process included multiple steps. So there was multiple technical components to this, ranging from a detailed review of the existing water infrastructure, the development and enhancement of hydraulic modeling to support the technical decisions, the development and evaluation of various alternatives to come up with the final capital program recommendations and operational plan recommendations, as well as throughout the process there's a number of touch points both with public as well as key stakeholders such as the operations department, fire department, and engineering staff to ensure that the plan met the best needs of all key stakeholders. And then following this process, we also had Public Information Center, which was held here at City Hall to get the public's feedback, as well as following adoption from council, as this will be submitted to public review for 30 days as part of the Class EA process. So throughout the key aspect of this was assessing what was the existing conditions of the existing water system, and through that process was found that that the existing water system is generally in good operations, and that there are a number of localized areas which had some less than ideal fire flow, which were generally related to either older cast iron water mains, which were restricting some capacity, or the area's distance from existing trunk infrastructure or placement outside the existing urban boundaries. So just essentially having smaller local water mains that restricted also the fire flow capacity. When coming up with this plan, there was also consideration for the growth implications within the city of Thorold. Through this master servicing plan, there was a wide variety of planning scenarios that were considered. So it was looking at what were the growth needs out to 2041, as well as consideration for the full build out of the city's existing urban boundary. And part of the rationale for that was that the timing, the location, and the pace of growth is somewhat uncertain. It could speed up, it could slow down, it could grow in different areas at different times. So looking at the ultimate build-out scenario ensured that any infrastructure decisions were being made had consideration for the full servicing of the city, so that we weren't necessarily undersizing any infrastructure, but still with the focus on the 2041 to be able to come up with appropriate funding needs and project triggers. And then another key consideration of this master servicing plan was not only addressing growth needs, was also how can we ensure that we're maintaining the existing infrastructure we have, so that's in good repair, and that we're able to sustain continued service to existing users and replace our water infrastructure as it ages and needs to be replaced. This was also used as part of the evaluation process of alternatives. So when looking at servicing options to address growth or existing deficiencies, we looked for opportunities to align those projects with the higher priority replacement projects. So if we have a growth need in an area, looking at alignments where we would be replacing older cast iron water mains or water mains that have a break history first before replacing water mains in good condition, so that we can try to optimize both state of good repair replacement needs along with sewer water upgrade needs. So when we were doing the development of alternatives and the assessment of the overall system. There was a couple key factors from a technical perspective that we were looking at, which was essentially maintaining good pressure for the water system, so ensuring that all the users had adequate pressure, in consultation with the city's fire department, assessing what were appropriate levels of fire protection for various land users and ensuring that we were providing that protection to the users within the city, as well as looking at water main velocities and water quality. And then when, as mentioned earlier, as part of the EA process in the evaluation of alternatives, we did look at the technical feasibility, environmental impacts, social, cultural, and financial viability of these alternatives, and for where there was various options coming up with the best approach that best met these overall needs. So at the end of the day, they came up with a capital program to address both the existing deficiencies as well as the outlining the trunk water main needs needed to support growth out to 2041 as well as build outs. In this capital program, we can see that there's approximately 2.8 million dollars needed to address existing deficiencies, which based off of your current water main replacement program equates to approximately 3 years of your current fund rate to address those issues. And then looking out to 2041, there was an additional $20 million in water main needs that were needed to support primarily growth, and those would be, depending on the location of the water main and the area, would be either funded through development charges or would be directly part of developer-led initiatives within new subdivisions. Okay. As well as part of this was looking at the operation and maintenance programs within the city's existing operations departments, and through there we've identified the need for a few additional studies and investigations to be completed to support the ongoing maintenance of the system, or having to deal with some improving non-revenue water within the city, or improving issues related to water quality. And so some of those programs relate to the backflow prevention bylaw study, water meter replacement study to come up with a plan for water metering in the future, as well as in discussion with the fire department looking for some fire flow retrofit programs, so the placement of some additional fire hydrants to support the firefighting within the unserviced areas within the city, as well as looking to install bulk water stations within the city. Also through there, we've identified a number of ongoing maintenance programs that the city could seek to enhance or add to their existing operations schedule. So the final component of this review was reviewing the financial sustainability of the water system in the context of the new recommendations as well as the existing funding sources. So from a capital perspective, it was found that the current investment dollars that the city is spending on their State of Good Repair program, if prioritized or reprioritized to address the deficiency areas, is more than adequate to address the city-led components of the capital program. The other, when looking out for growth up to 2041, we're seeing that we're looking at approximately a 30% increase in the overall water system to address this growth, so that would be tied to a need to increase your current operations and maintenance spend by approximately 30% to match that pace of growth. Also looking at the amount of potentially DC flagged projects in the capital program. There's a potential that looking out to 2041, the current DC rate may be potentially undercharging, so that there's a need to do an update to the DC study and to further define which projects are going to be DC funded versus developer-led projects. And then from an operations and maintenance perspective, through the review, we found that based on the current size of the city's water system and the current operational needs, there's likely a need to increase the operations staff as well as engineering staff by 2 FTE positions to bring it more in line with local municipalities and industry standards, and that looking out to 2041 to address the 30% increase in the water system and the 30% increase in operational maintenance needs out to 2041, there'd likely be a need to increase an additional 2 FTE positions to meet those needs. And that that in the near future that the rate study also be reviewed to ensure that these new recommendations are included and that they're appropriately funded moving forward.
Thank you for your presentation, Julian. Is there any questions? Seeing none, I thank so much for your presentation. What? Up next, we have Sue Moran, Thorold Tourism Agent, Venture Niagara, with their tourism update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council and City staff. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. It's kind of an end-of-a-year address that I'm giving you. We were here several months ago just to kind of introduce what our contract looked like for some of the newer councillors. And I do want to introduce my general manager, Frank Rupsik, who's here with me. We're very happy to have been working with the City of Thorold for several years now, and we look forward to continuing that. A little bit about Venture Niagara. I don't know if you know that we actually lend money to small businesses. So I just wanted to say that. We're there for your businesses as well, and we do lend in Thorold and all over Niagara, and we're very busy doing that. But we have this contract with the City of Thorold, and next year we will be celebrating our 35th anniversary. We're funded by FedDev Ontario, by the federal government through FedDev Ontario, and I just kind of wanted to make that clear for those of you who may not know. Is this really going to work? Or? Okay. I could keep talking and just talk about Venture Niagara. Thank you. So, as you know, in our contract, we manage the information center, and I'm going to say it again. City staff do an incredible job taking care of that building and answering any questions I have or any requests. The relationship is fantastic. We were open from May 15th to October 14th this year, and we had excellent summer students, and it was just a great summer. I put in this slide here to compare our numbers from the information center from 2017, 2018, and 2019. You'll notice that the number of visitors and calls at the top, the first line, in 2018 was pretty high, though 2017 and 2019 resemble each other all the way through. I have no idea, and I can't attribute that like 600 number to anything in particular. I tried to look at the calendar to see what was going on in 2018, and I really couldn't figure that out. We were opened an extra week or 2 weeks, one earlier and one later. So the numbers resemble 2017 pretty well. Even Steven. The good news is that people are actually coming in to learn more about Thorold. It's really fun to be able to get those questions. That's where we get them. That's where we can send them downtown and hopefully drive their business into Front Street or any other business in city of Thorold. And people love their Welland Canal. The minute we post that information online, people tend to show up right when the ship's coming in. So this is a little bit of our online traction and marketing. We do manage the thoroldtourism.com website. We have real-time media feeds right on the landing page. We also, you'll see that our numbers have increased through the last 4 years that we've been doing this, social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And we do have some videos that we have online, and videos just get great traction. So you'll see that we have a little bit of action on our accounts as well. Bridget is just going gangbusters. You'll see from 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. The last couple of years, we've gotten our numbers a little differently. We've gotten numbers from the organization that actually manages the Port Robinson Ferry, east and the west numbers. But if you look at those numbers, 10,431 people rode the Port Robinson Ferry this summer. I think that's pretty impressive. A lot of bicycles, mostly Niagara residents, which I think bodes well for the region that cost shares on the expenses of the Port Robinson Ferry. We send a lot of people there from the Lock 7 Information Center. A new thing that happened, well, I'm sure that the MS Hamburg's been around for a while doing the Great Lake tours, but I received a call in my office at the Welland Mills building from a tour operator saying, we are going to be on the MS Hamburg. We're coming through in September and October, I think it was. I had the 2 dates written down, and they said, we want to stop at your terminal and debark. I said, oh, okay. I took note of the word terminal because I don't know of any at Lock 7, and I've been there for a while. So I said, are you sure you're allowed to stop this ship and park and debark? Oh, yeah, no problem. I said, I'll call the Seaway and get back in touch with you. Got in touch with the Seaway. They said, no, they can't stop there. And so I called them back, and I introduced the Seaway person to the person I was talking to. Long story short, I was working there that day, and 5 buses, motor coaches, show up. The Hamburg comes in, pulls out of Lock 7 going towards Port Colborne, and stops and debarks probably 200 people. And the 5 buses turn around and then leave for the day, and the ship was then going to go on to Port Colborne, and I'm assuming they're going to pick up their people there. So they've got about 4 or 5 hours to go see the falls, go have lunch. Had I known, and when I got the first call, I wanted to get on board the ship, welcome them to Thorold, maybe organize a lunch at Club Capri or something. But then I was told it was impossible for it to park there. So when I got back in touch with the Seaway folks, they told me that they weren't allowed to do that, but they were going to let them do it this year, and that we wouldn't be able to do it. I wanted to tell you that little story because if we ever get into any conversations with the Seaway about debarking at Lock 7, I'd like to be part of that conversation. Anyway, moving right along, as you know, Pamela Minns had a wonderful, has done so much great work in heritage for the city and for all of us who love the heritage side of Thorold. And there was a celebration on December 1st for her 90th birthday, but the Thorold Tourism Advisory Committee gave her a photo of the banner that is on Front Street just for her to hang in her apartment as a thank you. And see, these are some of the activities for 2019. We did a photo shoot of the heritage banners. We put up the banners mostly with city staff who were excellent, incredible. And I attend the BIA marketing meetings so that we can pool our dollars together. I negotiated a $5,000 fund from the region. It's called the Local Area Municipal Fund to help the BIA market, to create a marketing strategy specifically for next year with Front Street being closed. We need to start thinking about that and rolling up our sleeves and working together to make sure we don't lose business downtown and to let people know that Front Street is open. We're looking at mystery history tours, so we're going to be working on that this winter. You did see the merchandise, I hope, around town. Baseball caps, t-shirts, and I brought you a copy of the postcards for each of you so you can take a look at them and enjoy. And also, I did some quarterly updates and all kinds of different things. The BIA is doing a digital mainstream grant. They got $10,000 from the Ontario BIA Association to help small businesses get online with their website and social media. For 2020 activities, again, working very hard with the BIA for that Front Street closure, which is going to be about 8 months possibly. And continue to work with the Digital Main Street folks, tracking the information from Lock 7, the tourists, and manage the center, work with, of course, Mr. Dilwaria to basically find out what the city wants from us, and we deliver that in the tourism world. We do need to work on better signage and direct people to Lock 7 information, because they're still finding us just because they're lost often. That's the way they find us. So I didn't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you. I see I went over a little bit, but I thought the story of the cruise ship was worthy of expanding on. So thank you very much.
Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Susan. Great presentation, as always. I guess my question for you is the Hamburg. Does it come through every year? And do other cruise ships, or whatever you want to call them, come through that we could tap into that?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the Hamburg does come through the canal a couple of times a year. I think the Pearl Mist as well, and I think there's another one. These are the Great Lake cruise ships. A good piece of business. I know that the city of Port Colborne, I've read some articles that they are investing some money in for the ships to be able to park there and debark. And then they were also debarking, I think, at Port Weller at one point. And then the people just go for the day. They've got about 8 hours and see Niagara Falls. So is there potential to stop there? I'm happy to have a conversation with the Seaway to see if they could. I was really concerned that the other ships wouldn't get around this one, but it must have known. They had a conversation with the Seaway Management Company, and they knew where to park this ship. But it was pretty funny when I saw the 5 buses pulling up. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Susan. Buses. I notice it's just level, about 800 people. As far as the buses are concerned, is there any way of promoting the buses stopping and letting people out, even if it's just at Lock 7? And once we get the downtown changed over into a beautiful downtown, and more beautiful than what it is now, having buses come down to downtown Thorold.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do get several buses at the information center. And by the way, they love the museum. Everyone loves that museum. I hope you've been in. I dream of a day when Front Street is beautiful and clean, so we can go chase that business. And it's under those terms that I would put my name and go talk to my contacts in the bus tour world to say, come to Thorold. I have the right company in mind. They bring in over 100 tours to Niagara a year. They're here for 3 days. They do 1 day in Toronto, and then they come back. And there is 1 day in particular that they do Niagara on the Lake in the morning, and they come up Lock 4, 5, 6, 7, and sometimes they stop at the information center. Easy enough to give them an incentive to stop, and hopefully they can unload their folks on Front Street. They can go for an hour, eat, shop, get back on, and move on. That's my intention, but we want to see a nice, clean, refurbished Front Street.
Any further questions? I just want to make one comment. I'm amazed at the growth on the Bridget. Unbelievable. And that's great. So I want to thank you for your presentation, Susan. And Frank, I want to thank you for coming as well tonight, and the great job you do for the city of Thorold.
Thank you very much, and I'll leave you those postcards so you can take a look at them. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to all. Happy New Year.
Same to you. Up next, we have Kelly Martell and Dana Anderson from Planning Consultants, MHBC Planning, Urban Design, and Landscape Architecture. Port Robinson West Secondary Plan, Phase 1 Lands Neighborhood Plan. Welcome.
didn't know. So this is. Oh, what have I done? Oh, hold on. Is it okay? Yeah. Can we go into full screen mode at all? Yeah.
You know how to go full screen? Oh, right here it says full screen. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh. Oh, good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Kelly Martell. I'm an associate with MHBC Planning. I'm here with Dana Anderson, who is a partner, and we're from our Burlington office. And we just are here tonight to give you a brief update on the Port Robinson West Secondary Plan Phase 1 Land Neighborhood Plan Project. So quickly, I'll run through the agenda for our presentation. We've gone through the introduction, so that's done. I'm quickly going to go through the context and background, the scope of work and work program, and give you some preliminary findings from our stakeholder consultation, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dana to talk about some revisions to the work plan and next steps moving forward to bring you with a recommended neighborhood plan in 2020. So quickly, by way of background, the Port Robinson West Secondary Plan was approved in 2000 and it's been amended from time to time since then. Most recently, it was updated to conform to the growth plan, the 2006 growth plan, as part of the city's official plan update. Now, since that time, there have been many changes to the land use planning context. We're now into a 2019 growth plan. As well as some other pieces of legislation, Bill 73, Bill 108, which have changed the context in which we are planning. So that is one reason for the review of the existing secondary plan and the neighborhood plan. But what we have today in the existing secondary plan is development of the lands is to occur in phases. So the phase 1 lands are all that are shown on this screen right now. As you know, there are phase 2 lands, but they aren't able to develop in accordance with the official plan policy until the phase 1 lands have been built out. Within the secondary plan area, which includes the phase 1 and phase 2 lands, there are 5 neighborhoods identified. 3 of those 5 neighborhoods are located within this neighborhood, or within the phase 1 land. So that's neighborhood 1, neighborhood 2, and neighborhood 5, which are shown on this screen. Neighborhood 5 consists of existing established residential neighborhood. Neighborhood 2 consists of the approved draft plans of subdivision for Merritt Meadows and Hansler Heights. Well, the balance of those remains undeveloped and would be developed for residential purposes at a later date. Neighborhood 1 includes Port Robinson Estates Phase 1, as well as the balance of the developable lands within the neighborhood, the phase 1 area. So this is the current land use schedule within the secondary plan for the phase 1 lands, and it kind of sets a high level intent for the development of the lands for a variety of uses, including low density residential, which would be the light yellow, medium density being the orange, and high density being the darker orange, and the green representing kind of environmental features or open space. And so this is the high level secondary plan that exists today. In the policy context, the secondary secondary plan requires that prior to the approval of any new development within an identified neighborhood, a neighborhood master plan is to be prepared and developed by proponents and or the city. And this is to include a road, block, and land use plan, a streetscape and open space plan, urban design and architectural guidelines, a servicing plan, and environmental impact statement. And what I would say to this is that really this is a more finer grained look at the balance of the neighborhoods based on the high level land use schedule that I had shown on the previous slide. And so we were retained along with Paradigm Transportation Solutions and MTE engineers to undertake a review of the city's existing secondary plan and prepare an update, including the updated neighborhood plan, a servicing memorandum, a transportation analysis, and urban design guidelines, architectural control guidelines, and a streetscape and open space plan. And we had proposed to do this in 4 phases, which are shown on the screen. We're currently completing the phase 1 background research and analysis piece, and we'll be moving into phase 2 very shortly. I'm not going to go through this in detail, as I believe you have this in your agenda. But this is the general work plan we had proposed as part of the proposal for this project. And just by way of where we're at and what we found, we have gone out and we've spoken with the landowner developers who have major land holdings in the areas to understand from them what they see as opportunities, constraints in the area in terms of the update. And so what we found was that there is a desire for flexibility in providing a unit mix. The existing caps in the official plan limit the number of townhouse dwellings within the low density area, and we heard from those landowners that there is an appetite in the community for additional range and mix of uses, including bringing townhomes in a greater capacity on. There was as well, we heard that there is a greater desire for flexibility and criteria for retail, commercial, and service commercial uses within the medium density residential designation along Port Robinson Road. So currently, commercial uses are permitted there subject to criteria. However, there isn't a wide range of uses that the developers and landowners are indicating that maybe consideration should be given to expanding to allow for office and medical clinic to serve those people who would be living in these neighborhoods in the future. We also heard there is desire for an appropriate separation provided between the existing industrial use and future residential uses. We know ES Fox operates there, and they intend to continue operating there, and they have retained land to ensure they're adequately buffered and want to continue that buffering to the future. And then my last point here is that we did, during these stakeholder interviews, find that there was a conceptual neighborhood master plan prepared for neighborhood 1. And on this basis, I'm going to hand it over to Dana and talk about how this is changing the scope of work slightly. So there you go.
Thanks, Kelly. So as a result of the stakeholder interviews with the various landowners, as Kelly indicated, we did find that there has actually been a substantial amount of work advanced on the Phase 1 neighborhood plan. And as a result of that, and with discussions with staff, we looked back on our work program to determine, carrying out this project, whether there was an opportunity to utilize that information that would otherwise be provided through the process and advance the secondary plan to completion, both with a revised scope of work and also a bit of a different approach, but maintaining the same intent in terms of delivering an updated neighborhood plan to council. So based on the background work that we had done, and also, as mentioned, the additional information that we have, we are recommending a revised scope of work, and that includes shortening the time frame, again, maintaining the intent of delivering a plan to you, shorter time frame, and you'll be very happy to know at a much reduced cost. So on that note, in terms of just highlighting the revised work plan proposal, a few elements I'd just like to speak to. Firstly, in terms of phase one, much of this work has already been done by us. This is the research and review of all of the existing documents and an identification of those updated policies that need to be reflected in the plan, as Kelly mentioned too, with some of the changes to provincial legislation. And certainly the stakeholder interviews have now been carried out, and we've collected all of that evidence and information. So phase one generally stays the same. In terms of phase two, this is where we have an opportunity to look at a revised scope of work, again, maintaining the intent of delivering an updated plan. And our original proposal sought out to develop what I'll call options for the neighborhood plan, and also engaging with the stakeholders in a workshop type of engagement exercise, and then going through a series of reviews of those options and analysis. And what we've found from the information that we now have available is that a lot of those options have been reviewed, and a plan has been presented with substantial background information. So we're recommending to council that at this stage we utilize that information and that comprehensive work that's been done, and we do a peer review of that with our expertise as well as our urban design expert and our engineering consultants that are on the team. And so you'll see a much shorter list of tasks under phase two, but again, providing a summary of an assessment of our background work and the additional work that's been presented. In terms of phase 3 and 4, we're proposing to condense those into one final phase, which would be phase 3, and that is actually preparing an updated plan based on our peer review and assessment, which would provide council with the required neighborhood plan to proceed with development on those lands. And so it's our opinion that the engagement with the community is maintained through this process as well, because we would still have touch points where we would have an opportunity for members of the public to engage in the process and provide comments at the public meeting that would be before council when we're bringing the updated plan forward. So in terms of timing and next steps, as I mentioned, the revised scope of work will again maintain the intent for the deliverables, but will shorten the time frame by as much as 4 or 5 months, with us presenting the updated plan to council sometime in mid to late March in terms of a public meeting, and then the adoption of that plan probably later that month. And then, as I mentioned, in terms of costs, we do have some copies of the updated work program, and also we provided staff with revisions to the work budget, and I believe the savings are generally in the area of about $50,000. So on that note, I'd be pleased to answer any questions and look forward to continuing this work to completion for council.
Thank you, Kelly and Dana. Are there any questions? I have one. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Affordable housing is becoming the big ticket item nowadays, and we're going to a couple of meetings, and we're scheduling a meeting with developers and planners and architects and that in the new year. I noticed nothing was said about affordable housing in your presentation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. It certainly is an element of the review that we will be engaging within, both in terms of the peer review and our update. So where there are currently policies that do not address that issue, we would be looking to that and incorporating that as part of the planning exercise.
Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, in part of Kelly's presentation, it showed a school on one of the charts, but it didn't show where it was going.
So I'll speak to that real quickly. What is shown on this map is in fact only the phase 1 lands, and the elementary schools have been selected generalized locations in the phase 2 lands. So there aren't elementary schools shown on this land because through the previous planning exercise and discussions with the school boards, they identified sites as part of phase 2.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, I want to thank Kelly and Dana for your presentation.
Thank you.
Up next, I have William Highcoop. I got to pronounce that right. Highcop or Highcoop?
Highcoop.
Highcoop. Sorry about that. Planner with Upper Canada Planning and Engineering Limited. Port Robinson West Secondary Plan, Phase 1 Lands, Neighborhood Plan.
Hello again, Mr. Mayor, Council. You know who I am, planner with Upper Canada Consultants. On this matter, I'm representing my clients, Empire Communities. I just wanted to speak briefly to express our support of the previous presentation from MHPC regarding the neighborhood plan and the proposed adjustment to scope of this plan. To date, the owner's consultant team, including Armstrong Planning and Project Management, MBTW, and Upper Canada Consultants, have put a lot of effort and work to provide planning and engineering framework for the development within the city's policy context of the official plan and the Port Robinson West Secondary Plan. We feel that this has accurately been reflected in the proposed scope of proposed change of scope. As you are aware, my clients are anxious to proceed with the development of their land holdings within the Port Robinson Neighborhood 1 and are in support of these changes, which enable the completion of the neighborhood plan a little bit earlier in March, as indicated. And we just wanted to express the development team's availability throughout this process. We're happy to work together with staff and their consultants to get this neighborhood plan completed. So thank you.
Thank you, William. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your comments. Okay, that's the end of presentations. We'll move on to motions of support. City of Thorold, Employment Lands Conversion, Councillor Neal.
Mr. Mayor, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kenny, that the City of Thorold Council request that Niagara Regional staff explore the appropriateness of a potential employment conversion with respect to 5.46 acres of land located at 1686 Beaver Dams Road for future residential development through the region's ongoing municipal comprehensive review process, that it be received and supported.
Wish to speak on that? Go ahead, Councillor Long.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to know the intent of why, I guess the reasoning why we want to change from employment lands to residential lands, where that's come from and what the reasoning would be.
Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yes, if you know that where this is where the ponds are next to the chemical plant, and this would be a great change to put residential to where the other residential subdivision is going right now. It'll be right next door, and will take care of a big problem we have as far as environmental issues.
Again, we're talking about all this development in town, all these different subdivisions, and I'm just wondering why we're going to try to take away, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea, I just want to understand why we want to take away employment lands, and especially you talk about these are trailing ponds, and we want to turn environmental area into residential as opposed to more of a, I guess, a friendlier use, which would be employment land. So again, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to understand where this has come from. I realize we're going to send it to the region to get their thoughts on it, but I just don't know where this came from. Considering the vast amount of residential land we have in the city and trying to take some employment lands away to make even more. So I just wanted
I'll
to...
direct that to Richard from Director of Planning.
Yeah, because Irish and Ridge, I believe, is...
I'll let Richard comment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, basically, the understanding is that we are requesting a consideration of the employment land conversion. This is the time for an opportunity to do that, and that's was meant to basically allow for the cleanup of the lands and cleanup of the area. This has been a request for a while, and now that the region is going through their MCR process, Municipal Comprehensive Review process, this is the time for it to be considered. And it's not necessarily a fait accompli, it just allows the region to consider the process and make a good decision.
Okay, so I understand that. So, but I guess I'll go right to the point. Who's requesting this? The landowner, or is it council requesting it?
No, it's the landowner that's requesting it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, everybody good? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Statement by councilors, and Councilor Neal on information on the upcoming housing forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Age-Friendly Committee, along with the city, are putting on a housing forum on January 30th, 2020, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Thorold Senior Center. We are inviting developers, architects, planners, real estate people, financial institutions, regional staff, including the Niagara Regional Housing, Thorold Nonprofit Housing that build in the city of Thorold. We are inviting the city's planning, engineering, operations department, and other senior staff. We are inviting council, regional age-friendly representatives, and other stakeholders. And there will be presentations by CMHC, the County of Simcoe on housing alternatives, life lease initiatives, and other housing programs. We will have 3 roundtable discussions on the different alternative housing programs we could incorporate in our community. We will be discussing planning and how to streamline our programs to make it easier to move through our system. We'll be discussing affordable housing, accessibility, green initiatives, and how to incorporate those programs into our policies and bylaws so that developers will include affordable housing, as I just mentioned earlier, in their housing initiatives. The Age-Friendly Committee looks forward to bringing forth some recommendations to Council on the promoting housing initiatives from this forum.
Is there any questions for Councillor Neal regarding that? It sounds like it's going to be a great day, and I look forward to attending that.
The second part of my presentation, Mr. Mayor, since Front Street needs to be...
But you need to get a waiver on this one.
Okay.
Because you didn't, so you need to ask to waive the rules to bring this forward.
Okay, I'd like to waive the rules to bring this particular project forward.
Front Street reconstruction forward. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we do the Front Street project with pre-approval because it's already in the base budget, and move forward with it.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor, that we move forward with the Front Street reconstruction project, because it's already in the base budget, and so that we can expedite that process, because the budget, it looks like it's going to be a little while. So I'll ask our Director of Finance to comment on that, and then I'll open the floor for a discussion.
Through Mr. Mayor, just so that...
Excuse me, I need a mover first. I got a mover, Councillor Neal, seconder, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for council's reference, what is presently included in the capital budget for Front Street reconstruction? There's $1.54 million in road reconstruction, $515,000 in storm sewers, $1,030,000 in sewers, sanitary sewers, and $515,000 in waterworks. The total is $3.605 million. Funding is through a combination of a very small portion, which is levy funded, which already exists in our base budget, along with federal gas tax and various reserves.
Okay, is there any questions regarding that motion? Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing, go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the appropriate Staff member. I'm just curious why this is coming up. It might be a silly question, but why was it held back and why are we pushing it forward?
We're pushing it forward because when we get through to budget, it's in the base budget for next year. And this way they can get the RFP ready and get it out and get better pricing, because by the time we finish the budget, it could be end of January, early February. There's a lot of municipalities that are already going out with RFPs, and we want to make sure that we can get this out and get better finance, better funding or pricing, and move the project forward so that we can start in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Review of compensation for crossing guards. Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask for a staff study prior to the budget of crossing guard remuneration in comparison to other local communities, but I've been told by our clerk, Donna, that it's being addressed through our HR department. Can anybody on staff just...
Councillor DeRose, is your mic on?
It's on. It's on, I'm sorry. I've got to... Yelling at kids at school too much. Yeah, so I just wanted to know if anybody on staff can give us an update as to the status of the research and if it will be completed in time for the budget.
I'll turn that over to our CAO, Manoj.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, our HR is looking at it. She has contacted, or in the process of contacting, a number of adjacent municipalities just to make sure that we compensate our crossing guard fairly. And the report will be presented to council in January.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's why I wanted to make sure that they're fairly compensated or at least looked at, and with the assurance that it gets done by budget time. Thank you.
Okay. And up next, I got Councillor Longo on Canada's Summer Games.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we all know, we passed the Canada Game project. That's great. We're moving forward. But in the last couple of weeks, I've had a couple questions directed at me, and I can't seem to get an answer. I spoke to the CAO, and it has to do regarding the final bid that came in. And a gentleman who contacted me has tried to get the final bid pricing, and he has even gone directly to the Canada Game Committee. They're telling him it's not public information, it's confidential. I'm asking that council direct the CAO maybe to contact Canada Games. I believe, being an owner, we need to have full disclosure on the cost of not only Canada Games Park, but also the Henley Island. We're city taxpayers or regional taxpayers, provincial and federal. It's a public project, and I'm really concerned at that answer that was given to this gentleman, and he showed me the documentation. So again, if we could just get the final bid numbers and the details of the bid.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to make a motion to that you direct him to do that?
Absolutely. I'd like the CAO to contact Canada Games and get a full detailing for our records here at City Hall. We should have, in my mind, the entire package presented to us in terms of not only what the bid prices are, but what's being built, and also timelines. I was a little shocked to find out that the majority of this project's not going to be ready for us, and these are things that I think we should have been told 2 weeks ago. But anyways, I'm past that. We just want to find out what the price is going to be.
Can I get a seconder? I got Councillor DeRose. Okay, any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I can just make a little comment regarding the timelines. One of the things that transpired is that what I do know is that the contracts awarded, that they get the facilities ready that have to be ready or critical for the games, that some of the parts that are part of the legacy facility, that rather than rush them and pay overtime, and that they take the time to make sure that everything's done properly and in place for the turnover to the consortium, which my guess is they're looking at more towards the end of the year. Am I correct? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just ask you a question, because one of my big concerns was And again, I'm getting my news from the St. Catharines Standard. I don't know how accurate it is, but I was under the understanding these arenas were going to be ready for the games because they're for box lacrosse. And now I'm hearing they're not going to be ready. So have they changed the venue for box lacrosse, or will they be ready?
My understanding is they're going to try and have the arenas ready for box lacrosse, but they might not be ready for ice, because if they need longer to work on the ice plant and that part related to the ice, that they'll have the time to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yep.
And if they're not ready, obviously, they'd have to make alternative arrangements, but my understanding is it's their goal to have those facilities ready. Okay?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yes, they've already made alternative venues if they have to use them, and it's all been set up.
Will it be the Thorold Arena?
Will it be the Thorold Arena? I can't answer. Okay, is there any further discussion on that? Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will certainly request the Canada Summer Games Host Society to provide that information, but if they cite some confidentiality that they don't want to share it, then I will share that back with council. Thank you.
Okay, maintaining arena schedules until after budget deliberations. I have Councillor Sentence, and then I also have Councillor Sentence on Pastone Mental Health. So do the arena schedules first.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion here, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kenny, that whereas in order to continue to operate efficiently at the Thorold Arena, as we currently do, with the use of one casual as the 7th staff member, and whereas in order to achieve this one casual must be approved until the 2020 budget deliberations are complete, as there is presently no wage budgeted for this purpose, and now therefore be it resolved that budget approval be granted for the 2-month period, and that the amount of $14,500 be added to the 2020 draft proposed budget, and that the current schedule be maintained. Councillor Kenny.
I'll open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, just a clarification, where we're going to go with the schedules that are already in place. Is this my understanding?
Yeah, technically it was the schedule that was in place from April, where they had the 10-hour shifts.
And then they will do discussions on changing schedules?
It changed, just briefly changed, and we just go back to that original April, if I have this right, April scheduling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Pastone Mental Health, again, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just something that I would like to ask that we refer to budget, the 2020 budget, to think about. Adding Pathstone's mental health satellite office. It's called the Here and Now Walking Clinic. The idea is that the city, as a city, we would designate a safe place or an office once a week for people who are in crisis or in need to talk to someone immediately. There's no referrals, no costs, no appointment, and no OHIP card necessary to do this. Pathstones provides the crisis counselor to this facility wherever we choose to go. The cost is $20,000 per year, and Niagara Falls, Niagara Lake, Grimsby, Beamsville, Fort Erie, Welland, Port Colborne, St. Catharines has 5 days a week have this. It affects more people than we can imagine, and especially a lot of our youth nowadays. And I think that Thorold should be a part of this group that I previously mentioned, so I'd like it referred to budget.
You like it referred to budget, so I got a motion from you to refer it to budget, so I have a seconder. Councillor Decker, any discussion on that? That it get referred to budget? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
I just want to say that thank you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, through you. I'm definitely in support of that. I personally known somebody who was having difficulties, and it's very hard to get help, and even just in trying to help them. So I think that's an excellent idea, and I have full support for that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, that's the end of statement by councillors. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, we resolve into general committee. Call general committee to order. Any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to delegations. Keith McKinnon, KLM Planning Partners Incorporated, Director of Planning and Development Services Report, PDS 2019-38. And I welcome you to the podium, Keith.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, members of the public. So as stated, my name is Keith McKinnon. I'm with KLM Planning Partners, Inc. Here on behalf of Starflowers Properties, which is the owner of the subject lands that are subject to the staff report that Your Worship just outlined. You may remember we were here in middle of August for our statutory public meeting for our application. And really, I just wanted to provide, a sort of a brief background or information, I guess, to council, some things that may have gotten lost at the public meeting. And I think, really to start, the first part that I think really got lost at the public meeting is that the subject lands that are subject to the zoning bylaw amendment application and the draft plan of subdivision application are currently approved today. So as we stand here today, they are currently approved. There's 148 within this phase, 148 units, which consisted of semi-detached dwellings and 4 single detached dwellings. And the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application and draft plan of subdivision was to rezone and to redline revise the draft plan to actually reduce the number of units. So again, as we stand here today, it's approved for 148, and we were reducing it by 20 units as part of our application. So by virtue of the reduction, we were adding 30 more single detached dwellings, so we'd have a total of 34 single detached dwellings, and then we would have 94 townhouse dwellings. So the original approval today has semi-detached dwellings and singles, and the proposed revision that was expressed at the public meeting back in August is for single detached dwellings and townhouse dwellings. So it's a reduction of 20 units. So I think that part was the factor that really got lost at the public meeting, is that we were actually reducing the density, which is a bit unusual these days. Obviously, provincial policy seeks to intensify, et cetera. And so instead of actually adding more units, we're reducing the number of units. I think is also a question that had come up at the public meeting was in relation to the on-street parking ability. So we did an analysis to look at what the on-street parking availability is currently today based on the draft approved plan. With the 4 singles and semi-detached dwelling units, it would provide a total of approximately 48 on-street parking spaces, whereas the proposed revision would provide 50. So it's certainly not a huge sum of additional on-street parking, but it does provide more on-street parking. Your Worship and members of council, staff have provided you with a very detailed staff report. They've certainly gone through a great analysis. I certainly don't want to stand here and review it. I'm sure you've all reviewed the staff report. We are certainly in full support of staff's recommendation. We think that they have outlined all the items associated with it. And we're just here this evening, Your Worship, to hope that council certainly sees the benefit of our applications, and when it comes time for the bylaws to come before council, that we would hopefully seek your support with those applications. So with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise from my delegation.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Do we have any questions for Keith? Councillor Neal.
I just want to reiterate that affordable housing is the name of the game nowadays, and I know that you don't have any in this particular subdivision. So I invite you to our January 30th meeting or forum where we will discuss the different alternatives of housing in Thorold, and hopefully we'll come to some sort of a plan regarding affordable housing.
If I may, Your Worship, yes, thank you. I did hear with interest that, specifically that Simcoe County is going to be here. I'm actually live in Simcoe County, do a lot of work in Simcoe County, so certainly my client is being a long-standing corporate citizen of the City of Thorold. I'm sure we'd be certainly happy and delighted to attend that meeting. So happy to see the details of that.
Any further questions for Keith? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McKinnon. Mr. McKinnon, can you explain why the company that you're representing wants to build less units? Why the change?
So as I mentioned through your worship to the councillor at the public meeting, because I think you asked a similar question at the public meeting. So really it's market driven. Semi-detached dwelling units are certainly not in what's the market is seeking these days. They're seeking more of the single detached dwellings and the townhouse dwellings. So in order to keep this project moving and continuing to be able to pay development charges to the City of Thorold, they're obviously wanting to respond to where the market is today, and the change in the plan is reflective of what those changes are seeing in the market.
Right. Now, do you understand our concern regarding the townhouse projects and the issues they create in our community?
Certainly understand what the concerns that were expressed. Obviously, we can't, as professional planners, determine who lives in the dwellings, but we do know the City of Thorold has very robust requirements as it relates to student housing. As I had mentioned, I was the one that approved the student housing here across the street on Schmon Parkway. So we've certainly, from that standpoint, have tried to assist the City of Thorold with your student housing problems, but we do know you do have a robust system in place that would deal with those issues if they were to arise later in the future.
Right. Now, do you think it would be unreasonable for us to want to limit the number of townhomes in that neighborhood?
Well, through you, Your Worship, there are a number of townhouses already in the community as it stands today. So, I think the proposal that we have before you today is certainly reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further questions for Keith? Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, I'm just wondering on the square footage of these units, if you have that information.
I don't. Through your worship, I don't have that answer. Certainly a question we can certainly try and provide. Mountain View is likely the home builder of these units, but off the top of my head, sir, Councillor, I don't have that size, so what they might be.
Do we have any information from planning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the application is really to create the lot fabric, and there's less of an emphasis on the actual building designs this time. So we do have an idea how many of each type of unit is proposed, but we don't have square footage information right now.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Keith. So there's documentation here on the street parking, and there's 2 additional spots on the street in the new plan. But what I'm curious about is how many parking spots are in the driveway in this plan compared to the original plan with the semis and singles, now townhouses. How many cars can fit in that driveway? Or the size of the driveway? Yeah, maybe planning knows that better, I'm not sure.
Do you want me to take a stab at it? No. Yeah. Through your worship, Councillor, as Mr. Klassen just noted, there's no change in the zoning for the proposed parking required for the units. So they are exactly the same, meaning a minimum of 2. In most cases, they will have double car garages with double lane or double driveway, meaning at least a minimum of 4 spaces likely will be able to be provided on those. But the minimum of 2, as per the bylaw, will continue to apply. We have not proposed to amend that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I want to thank you for your presentation, Keith.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to call for reports to be brought forward from consent. And go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we pull forward PDS 2019-38, please?
Yes, we can. Any other reports that we want to bring forward from consent? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 2019-05, and can I bring up a discussion report now or no?
No.
No, okay. 2019-05, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. PDS 2019-45.
PDS
2019-45.
45, okay, yeah. And I got Councillor Neal.
CC 2019-74.
74, okay. So I've got those duly noted. Can I have a motion to move the rest of the reports forward? So that's B, C, F, G, I, and J. Can I have a motion? I got Councillor Sentence to move those reports forward, okay? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so we'll start with PDS 2019- I know, but this one was first. We'll do this first. PDS 2019-38. Councillor Wilson, you're going to move that report first, right?
So moved.
So moved, and you want to speak on that? Go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't like the idea of this if I'm giving my opinion, but I guess I have the same concern that everybody else does, but I guess my question to staff is that if we don't allow this to go, if we're in any sort of legal trouble where this will be challenged and end up passing it anyways, but unwillingly, but cost our citizens money. We can speak to that.
I'll turn that over to our Director of Planning. Richard, did you want to speak on that?
Certainly. Council has the ability to make the decision they want to make. The applicant has a opportunity to appeal that decision to the Ontario to LPAT, and there could be a hearing as a result if it's not appropriately settled. I don't know what the developer's intentions would be to appeal a decision of council that's contrary to what they're applying for, but certainly that's an option that they have to consider. And I wouldn't be able to suggest who would win that process, but our staff has supported the application, so council would have to find their own planner to support their position.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anyone else have questions? Go ahead, Councillor Long.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so I guess through you to Richard. So can you explain staff's reasoning why this would be supported? Is there an easy answer to that?
There's not an easy answer. The staff went through provincial policy. They went through our official plan, regional official plan, zoning bylaw, and made the opinion that it was a reasonable request. As was mentioned, staff are not necessarily concerned about tenure of a dwelling. I think it was mentioned as well that the city has a fairly robust licensing process with respect to rental accommodations. So that's the city's opportunity to manage tenure, if you can say it that way. Also, with respect to the types of townhouses or the types of dwellings, townhouses are a more affordable, usually, form of residential development rather than semis. There is an understanding that we try to encourage affordable housing within our developments, but we sort of don't have a target to reach with respect to affordable housing, and the market-driven processes that have afforded this application is what sort of speaks from the developer's point of view.
I guess I'll just make a comment, Mr. Mayor. I understand that affordable housing is important, but I don't think this was the provincial government's plan to they probably couldn't foresee this, nor could City Council, that affordable housing in Thorold means being affordable for landlords to buy property and house students and basically turn our neighborhoods into dormitories, and that's what's happening here. And I understand what Councillor Wilson's saying. Sure, we can say no, but we'll lose an appeal probably. And I don't know what we need to do to make the provincial government stand up. We've had countless meetings with them and talked about this. We need to do something, because this is slowly but surely ruining our west neighborhood in Confederation Heights. And I'm not sure what else we can do. We'll waste money, I believe, if we don't vote for this, but I probably won't put my hand up either way here. It's it's a lose-lose for us here.
Well, I think that I agree with where you're coming from, Councillor Longo, but I think the big thing is, as far as where we're moving and working with different developers to build more purpose-built housing for students, like the lofts and different initiatives like that, I think that's the biggest gain we can do to get students into that type of housing. Like we're looking here with the Foundry Lofts at 1,128 bed addition, if everything goes
I understand that, Mr. Mayor.
That's how we're going to change the landscape.
I understand that, but with the growth of the university, with enrollment increasing every year, with relatively cheap real estate in the Niagara region, people are going to come down here and buy it up and fill it up with students, and it just creates problems in our neighborhoods. And I don't know how we solve the problem, because we are mandated to have density, but that's not what the government was looking at. They weren't looking to have density for student housing in residential areas, and it's a lose-lose for us.
Any further comments? Go ahead, Councillor Thorold.
I agree with Councillor Longo. I keep hearing from people, they don't want these townhouses, they don't want density with Brock students. And in this particular area, I know of 3 lifelong Thorold residents that are pulling up stakes and leaving Thorold because of what's going on, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. So as Councillor Longo states, we're kind of exasperated as what can be done, and hopefully we can get to some resolution, because I think it is affecting that part of our city in a negative way. Thank you.
Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. My biggest pet peeve since I've come on council has been our lack of municipal control in these situations. Not to discourage development or be a pain, but I would really like to know, maybe Richard, you could tell me, is there a way, or do you have to do it as a group, that you can gain more say in your municipality, other than having to go by the density thing, the provincial density mandate? How do you get that back, or how do you get it? Is there a way? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I just... it frustrates me to know.
Certainly, I think one of the things that you have going for you is you do have a robust licensing bylaw that addresses rental units and make sure they're safe and make sure that they're good quality living. The difficulty with not regulating tenure through Planning Act processes is that you can't sort of say you have to be owner operated or whatever. And so I think there's what you sort of see a little bit is that you have a university, you have students, you have housing, and all 3 are sort of symbiotic together.
Yeah, I'm actually even going beyond that. I'm talking just students, I'm just talking about actually having a say. Maybe it sounds like sour grapes, having a say in your community as to, well, that doesn't really fit the community. That doesn't really fit there. To be able to say, you know what, let's rethink this or not do it. To have actual say as a municipality and not have to do what the province says, not just student-wise.
Well, there's certainly an opportunity for us when, after the region does their official plan, to look at our official plan. Certainly we have to be cognizant and respect the provincial policy, and we have to also respect regional policy. But that's our ability in what we can do to look at our own unique situations while being consistent with that policy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all frustrated, as we can tell. I don't know when the last time AMO went against the provincial government to tackle this situation, but I think maybe it's time that we got together with all the other communities that do have universities within their jurisdiction and see if we can't collectively go back at the provincial government and ask that they change the rules to accommodate certain subdivisions or, certain areas of the city that the universities are in. I think we have to be proactive and go at it from that aspect. I'm sure it's been tried before, but let's try it again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably through you to Richard again. I believe I currently have a project off of DQ Road where it's a subdivision but more of a condominium style. And my understanding is that would help control what goes on in the neighborhood in terms of like parties and outbreaks and things of that nature. Is it possible for us when we're looking at a new development to suggest or only look at developments that are going to have that type of condominium community? Is that possible?
Richard, go ahead.
It's a tough question because the tenure the form of development that they're proposing here is on public streets and wouldn't necessarily be a condominium development. A condominium development can create rules, but they still have to meet the requirements of the planning that they're in. I don't think we can create if this is the right word, gated community that would restrict a development or the tenure or that kind of thing in this situation, particularly because this will be on a public road and will be through created lots. I don't think it's the intent of the developer to make this a condominium.
But going forward for additional land that's there, is that possible for us to only look at those types of developments?
We would probably have to consider rezoning them to permit just condominium development. I think we have a zoning in our new zoning bylaw that relates to that.
So,
does that answer your question?
yeah, can I just ask one more question?
Yes.
How would we go about doing that? Like, would we put a motion forward and say, oh, that other existing land that's there that hasn't been bought up yet, let's rezone it and make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yes, but then we would also be subject to a possible appeal and discussion on that as well. Maybe what we can do as staff is sit together as planning department and talk about this in a little bit more in a staff meeting, and maybe if a councillor likes to sit in with us on that and we can have some discussion on it, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Councillor Neal, go ahead.
That's the reason why January the 30th forum is all about. The alternative housing situations, whether it's affordable housing or whether it's the gated community and that. So that's where we'll have developers there, we'll have our planners there, we'll have our engineers. We'll have a full range of different people that are experts in trying to figure this out. So my suggestion is you come to the forum if you can, and or at least find out about it, and we'll go and make recommendations to staff to further, like you were just mentioning, to further our situation that we're in.
Any further questions? Okay, I think go ahead, Councillor.
Can I just make a comment to, Councillor Neal mentioned something a little bit earlier, talking to upper levels of government and so on. Just to let Councillor Neal know that, an American attest to this, that at AMO, we met with the Minister of Colleges and Universities, and I was very blunt with him, telling him he was under the impression that every community that had a university must be so happy and fortunate. And I told him the feelings from the city of Thorold, not only in terms of our lack of support through heads and beds, but through what was happening to our community because of the number of students living in it. He told us at that meeting that he would get back to us. That was August. I haven't heard a word since then. So my feeling is I wouldn't be holding our breath, because the provincial government doesn't care about Thorold, and it's unfortunate, and we're just going to have to live with this unless something miraculous happens.
But if you look at, we made a presentation on Bill 108, and that's where we made a presentation about how the density targets don't work in student communities. So we did address it at AMO, just so you know.
Yeah, but I think we as an individual community didn't do the job, and maybe collectively, if we get together with the 8 or 10 other communities that have universities in them, and collectively go to the government, but even if it's through AMO.
Councillor Neal, the 8 or 10 other communities that have universities in their heart love those universities.
That's right.
Because they're compensated by them.
But if you look at the situation, the biggest change you can make to improve things, and I'm going to tell you, is student purpose-built housing. That's the easiest way you're going to take pressure off the subdivision. If you look at any of the plans we've seen tonight, and you can go up in Rolling Meadows, which is in a student community, and you can go in the Port Robinson. Did you see the amount of townhouses that are being built? And the reason townhouses are being built is because it's affordable. It's the most affordable type of housing. In this area, it doesn't always work like that, but in other areas of the city, that's what the developers are building. They're building townhouses. So, I mean, and why are they building townhouses? Because it's affordable for because the price of housing in Niagara is going through the roof, and townhouses is the cheapest form of new housing.
But Mr. Mayor, not to debate, but Hansler Heights, Merritt Meadows, Artesian Ridge, they do not have townhouses in abundance like this property does. They have single-family homes and semi-detached. So I know we're not here to debate that, so I'll...
Hansler Estates has a lot of townhouses. Anyway, we're not here to debate that. You see what's in front of you. You see the staff report. Okay? And so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Put up your hand. Opposed? I vote. Motion's carried. PO 2019-05, strategic planning for the city of Thorold, and I had Councillor DeRosa, want to move that?
Yeah, I just wanted to
And then you want
discuss.
to speak to? You're going to move that and then speak to?
Yes.
Okay?
I just curious through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, isn't a strategic plan supposed to be done in the first 6 months of a new council?
So so the council was elected and they were sworn in December last year. So we have gone through, we have taken council to various facilities. We have presentations on what the city is doing in various areas. We educate council, bring you up to speed. There were 5 new councillors just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. In July, I guess, I have sat down with every councillor. I have invited everyone to sit down with me just to provide their thoughts, what they would like to keep into this strategic plan. We have done this. We just want to make it a more inclusive document rather than just rush it through. We have put it out, the RFP. It closed in November. we were busy with Canada Summer Games. At that time, we looked at it, we reviewed the proposals. We have 7 submissions, I believe, and now we are bringing it to council for the recommendation. The process will start in January, and then about 4 or 5 months process. So that will be for the balance of this council terms, and also we'll also look at the long-term strategy for the city, and it will take care of the vision that the council wants to move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further more speakers? I just want to say that one of the reasons, too, we waited was because we were doing all the master plans. And we wanted all the master plans to roll into the strategic plan, so it was premature at the time to start on that before we did our work on the master plan.
The other thing I want to add through you, Mr. Mayor, is that you remember that pretty much throughout this year, we are also under this whole regional governance review. So sometime if we would have engaged someone to get into it, it may have been premature if province decided to go the other route. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I have recommendation report, PDS 2019-45, for plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw applications for PTWP Lot 71. Who pulled that one? Councillor Longo. Okay, do you want to move it first? Move that report? And then speak to the report. Go ahead.
Do we have staff give us an update and read the report, or do I just speak to it? Do the recommendations get read to us?
Planning report. Does anyone from planning want to speak on that? Read the recommendations. Yeah, go ahead.
The recommendations of the Planning and Development Services Report 2019 is that the draft plan of subdivision be approved subject to the conditions outlined in the report, and it would create 40 freehold lots for single detached dwellings on Hodgkins Avenue. And it also suggests we should consider a zoning bylaw amendment to not only rezone from the existing zoning bylaw, but also to the new zoning bylaw as well.
Okay. Speakers to that report now, and then I have Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I wanted it read was because I want people to know what we're talking about. Otherwise, it's just a number. Yeah. So this is a development in Thorold South that came up a couple weeks ago, and at that point, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard, we had a citizen here talking about flooding, and I just want to make sure that that was addressed and we understand what those issues were, and if we are safe moving forward with this development and we're not going to have any more flooding or increased flooding.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Longo, there was a pretty detailed part of the report that dealt with public comments, and a number of, all the comments were highlighted that we received at the public meeting and also in writing, and they have all been responded to. I'm looking for the one relating to grading. If I remember correctly, it was going to be addressed through the grading plan through the subdivision. If I find it, I'll get back to you.
So my question, I guess, would be, though, these flooding complaints that this resident mentioned, does this have anything to do with the work we've done in the Thorold South area and the Rolling Meadows development and things of that nature? Or is this a grading issue, flooding from culverts? I just want to make sure we're not adding increased capacity to a system that may not be able to handle it.
Your Worship, to Councillor Longo, the flooding issue was addressed under number 11. It says the proposed development will be designed to manage surface drainage generated from the site without impact to the adjacent lands. Existing drainage matter on a site-by-site basis can be addressed by contacting the city's engineering department.
But would the existing infrastructure for sewage capacity and stormwater capacity be able to handle this? And I don't know if you know that or if Jeff knows the answer to that, but...
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we've done the analysis, and based on the number of units, there's adequate dry weather flow capacity. But as you know, in that area of our municipality, we do have some impacts from wet weather flows. Some of it can be addressed through lot grading. Some of it can be addressed through the sump pump installation. But the recent work that we've completed has not resulted in the system surcharging. There may be some localized issues with laterals and some other surface drainage, but it has nothing really to do with capacity. So that's why we were confident in recommending that we proceed with the project.
Okay, that's the word I was looking for, you're confident, so thank you.
Okay. And did you want to speak, or you're...
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, we have engaged GM Blueplan, I guess, a couple of years back. They have said that we could go ahead with 200 dwelling units per year. And so basically they can say that they have said that we can go 200 dwelling units for the next 5 years. So we are definitely not anywhere close to the capacity what was been asked by them. So thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CC 2019-74, I had Councillor Neal. Do you want to move it first?
I'll move it.
Okay, and you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just that it's the Allenburg Community Center. Now, we've dealt with this, a couple of our councilors here have dealt with this before, and the report says that renovations would be $1.2 million, and you're looking at the rates, which is fine, but can we assess whether that recreation center is going to be for the Rolling Meadows subdivision, for Thorold South, for Allenburg? Is it in the right spot? Do we want to spend it $1.2 million because it is in bad shape? Or do we want to build a new one, or move it, or whatever? I recommend that we take a look at this in a more detailed manner to see what options we might have for that area.
Did you want to speak to that, Curtis, or manager of facility?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that number was just a consideration of future potential. However, the plan will obviously be deferred to the Parks and Rec Master Plan on where we believe we need to go and develop and change things. So that report should be released early in the new year for councillors' consideration, and then it'll fall in line with the strategic plan as well and give us some vision.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we're going to move on now to discussions, reports. PWCS 2019-89, Corporate Administration Space Plan. Can I get a mover for that report? Councillor Sentence. Who's bringing that forward? Okay, and I'll ask our Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman, to speak.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that council approve the allocation of funds in the amount of $500,000 from the Building Renovations Staff Accommodation Project to provide for additional workstations and operating efficiencies identified in the report. And two, that staff be directed to initiate the procurement process for various elements of the project in accordance with the city's purchasing policy.
Okay. Councillor Neal's moved the report. No, who moved that?
Councillor Sentence.
Councillor Sentence, excuse me. Speakers to that. Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, we discussed this a little earlier, but I don't remember this in last year's budget. Can I get staff to explain where this $500,000 is coming from?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, and not to step on the Director of Finance's toes, but the budget was originally set at $1.2 million, from which we allocated about $350,000 for review of the operations center and a review of space efficiencies here at City Hall. So that out of the $850,000 left, I'm asking that we allocate $500,000 towards the actual improvements here.
And I remember last year there was talk about refurbishing the upstairs of the old City Hall and now the new senior center. Is that still going ahead?
Mr. Mayor, the improvements to 8 Carlton, the recommendation in the report back last May was to set that project aside until we finished the Parks and Rec master plan and determine the potential future use for that space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. PDS 2019-42, report regarding the harmonization of planning fees. And I'll turn that over to Richard, our Acting Director of Planning.
The recommendation is for council to approve a bylaw updating the fee schedule to the fees bylaw to harmonize planning fees within the city of Thorold.
Can I get a mover for that report? Councillor Wilson, speakers to that report. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. PDS 2019-43, report regarding a statement of concurrence for the proposed wireless telecommunications installation at 401 Allenberg Road. And again, I'll turn this over to our Acting Director of Planning, Richard.
The recommendation is that council pass the following motion, that the city of Thorold concur that the proposal by Rogers Communications not to erect a wireless communications on lands known as 401 Allenberg Road, Thorold, and owned by the Rose Brothers General Contractors is fully aligned with the municipality opinion with the requirements of protocol for radio communication and broadcast antennas, all obligations for
Can I get a mover for that report? Councillor Longo. Speakers to the report. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. PDS 2019-44, report regarding a statement of concurrence for the proposed wireless telecommunications installation at 3400 Schmon Parkway. Again, I turn that over to Acting Director of Planning, Richard.
Thank you. Schmon Parkway, Thorold, Ontario, and owned by New Apostolic Church of Canada, and is fully compliant in the municipality's opinion with the requirements of ISED Canada's default protocol for radio communication and broadcasting antenna systems, and all obligations for the municipal and public consultation requirements have been satisfactorily addressed. And there's a letter of concurrence, a statement of concurrence that we would send to the applicant.
Okay, can I get a mover for that report? I got Councillor Neal. Speakers to the report. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. PDS 2019-46, report regarding Thorold 2019 development charge exemption review. And again, I'll turn this over to Richard.
As you can tell, we've been busy in the planning department.
Where are we going to bylaws?
The recommendation is that council approve a bylaw updating the development charge exemption bylaw to implement the findings of the Thorold 2019 development charge exemption review, and it's the revision of December 2019 that the report relates to.
Okay, can I get a mover for this report? I got Councillor Longo, speakers to this report. Go ahead, I'll start with Councillor DeRose.
Question. I'm totally in support of this. I just had a question on staff can answer. Is there a way? Sorry, is there a way to verify that the applicants are scrutinized so they are? So I was looking at tenants on a waiting list, that the prospects are in fact low-income families. Is there anybody on staff that can answer that? I know Sergio's here. I don't know if. Just because from what I've heard through the community is that there are people on there who aren't low income that are on a waiting list. So I just, for my own peace of mind, needed to know.
Well, I think that nonprofit housing is, it's a percentage of each. So do you want to, I'll let Councillor Kenny explain.
Yeah, so on the 60-unit build, I'll use that for an example. It's $12 million, got $5 million grant. So there's $7 million left. There's 60 units there. With the group having a $7 million mortgage, you have to get enough to cover the $7 million. So you get market value and you get geared to income people, okay? But you can't put all low income people in there because you have to cover the mortgage. So it's a ratio, and the ratio is set by the amount of money you have.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to ask any questions on that? I got Councillor Neal.
On that specific thing, no. I have another question.
Regarding the DC. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on page 10, it states that it is recommended that the potential development of a citywide affordable housing incentive program be explored outside of the development charge bylaw and in partnership with the Niagara region. Do we need a motion for that to happen, or will that happen?
I'll turn that over to the Director of Finance. Do you want to answer that one? No? Okay, Director. I'm trying to give you some airtime there.
We can take that under advisement and proceed with it. I don't think we need necessarily a resolution of council, but if council would like to put one out, we'd be happy to accept it.
Background studies.
It's in the background study, so she says it's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few questions, and they all relate to nonprofit housing exemption here.
Yeah.
And I'll just like to recognize Sergio Payon. He's from Thorold Municipal Nonprofit Housing. We had a long discussion today on the telephone, and I'm going to try to ask all his questions for him because I don't think he can come up and ask. But if I forget any, he'll probably point those out. So I guess my first question here to the appropriate staff member is, and again, I'm looking at this from Thorold Municipal Nonprofit Housing, and for full disclosure, I sit on that board. They're looking to build a 60-unit build, and the conversation is on the exemptions for brownfields. Now, this building is going to be on a brownfield development with 75% development charge exemption. Is that correct?
We had an opportunity to connect with Sergio Payon, and we were going to look into that in more detail. We haven't had an opportunity to do that yet.
Okay, because that's really important because we're trying to understand if, I guess the word would be double dip here. Could Thorold Municipal Nonprofit Housing use the brownfield exemption and the nonprofit exemption that are put in this bylaw?
We'd have to check into that, but I don't see necessarily something preventing it, not unless there's some process thing that we haven't addressed yet.
Okay. And if I can understand the nonprofit housing, they would be exempt only for the units that are below market rent?
That is correct. That's the same model that the region uses as well.
So, so if 50% of the building is below market rent and the 50% is market rent, then they would get a 50% reduction in development charges.
They'd get 100% for the development charges on the units that are below rent. They also have an opportunity through the new Bill 108 to pay the remainder of the development charges, or the development charges for the market rent opportunities over 20 years. So there's an ability to spread the payment over 20 years.
Okay. And you're saying there may be an ability for them to also claim the brownfield development charge exemption?
Yes, and we'd like to look into that, and we said we would look into it for Mr.
Okay.
Peel.
Would that be something they'd get an answer on quickly, because they're trying to finalize their budget for this?
Yeah, we can. I'll try to get something this week.
Okay. I'm just thinking out loud. Any more questions, Sergio? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, a comment.
You can deal with our planning department and deal with Richard. Anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the appropriate staff member. Just tagging along with Councillor Longo mentioned, I thought at this meeting that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, we had asked staff to go back and put in this bylaw that we were exempting any Thorold non-for-profit housing developments from these charges, period. And now I see that it's only for the below market rental units, which I don't think is what we asked. And so either we asked staff, in my opinion, to change this so that the project, because I think the whole project is the point. They have to have, as the previous councillor mentioned, they have to have at market value units, and then those that accommodate people's incomes. And so to just apply it to half the units makes no sense to me. I know that previously this council has always exempted the Thorold non-for-profit housing developments from development charges, and that's something I would like to continue to support, because I think that that is constantly something that's coming before us. So I'm not sure what the appropriate action is, but I'm not willing to approve it the way it is, because I don't think that's what we asked staff to do, with all due respect.
Do you want to comment on that, Richard?
Certainly. We looked at the opportunities for us to finance and address a development charge exemption. That's in the report. It's also in the report that that's the process that the region uses for their exemption, and we went with that. Certainly the understanding is that we want to address affordable housing, and that's the units that we were targeting.
Okay, so I understand that. However, in the past, we have always exempted the entire building. So either we just go back to that process, and every time it comes before council and we exempt it, or we stick with this, or we have this and then we still have the opportunity to bring it up and exempt the other portion. I'm not sure, but I just don't understand why we wouldn't accept the building. This building may obviously have the brownfield exemption, but ones in the future may not, and I just think as a council we want to support that. So
in the past, what we did is we did it on a basis when they come to council. Council dealt with it on a one-by-one basis.
yes, and I understand that, but I thought my understanding from our last meeting was that instead of doing that, we were going to put it in writing that this was our process, so that whether it's this council or future councils, that's what carries forward. So
Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Wilson. I thought that's what we were here tonight, to waive these DC charges on this project completely, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago and waited for the report. I thought that's what we were doing tonight and going forward, to tell you the truth. So I need some clarity on this too, if you don't mind.
Well, Richard, do you want to comment on that, or no? Okay, Councillor Kenny.
My question would be along the same line. I mean, if the Thorold nonprofit has to pay more money, then, as Councillor DeRose said earlier, if they're paying more money and they have less money, they're obviously going to need more market value people in there and less people that need the help. So what are we doing here?
If I could, there was no exemption permitted before this this review came into effect. So there was never an exemption beforehand, and or at least permissible through the development charge bylaw. And so this is a new territory for the city. And with respect to that, we were wanting to focus on the affordable parts of things, recognizing that there's also ways that they can spread out the payment of the development charges over 20 years that the province provides for.
Does anyone else want to comment on that? Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, I know we did exempt fully the last project that the Thorold nonprofit housing did. But I guess my comment regarding this is if another nonprofit organization comes forward, whether it be the St. Catharines nonprofit housing, because they have a building in Thorold, or another new organization's come forward, are we discriminating against those other organizations that will come forward, because we're going to deal with affordable housing and this is going to start the ball rolling? Is that how do we do it through the report that we have here tonight, or do we do it piecemeal? Every time a project is brought forward, as we look at it and we go against what we're going to talk about, or what we're going to pass tonight maybe. It's a hard decision to make, but that's what council's all about, but it could hurt us down the road.
This bylaw talks to nonprofit housing in general, correct?
It talks about nonprofit housing corporations, yes.
Yeah, so it does not restrict it to Thorold nonprofit housing.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I want people to be clear here and that's what this is speaking to. Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Sorry, so if we pass this tonight, does the project that we're talking about, not Sergio's project, but that project, is it waived of all DC charges like we talked about 2 weeks ago? It's not.
Wait.
No, the market rent units would be required to pay development charges.
Unless they were granted the brownfield grant. Am I correct when I say that?
Yeah, if the brownfield is part of it, then theoretically, because this was an application before the change was made, they would be able to double dip.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry. When you say double dip to a maximum of 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know the details of the brownfield exemption, so that's why I need to look at it. I'm not exactly sure.
I got Councillor. Go ahead.
Well, I think until we get some of these answers, some of us don't know which way we want to vote on this.
So if someone wants to, that hasn't spoken, can defer it, and we'll bring it back when we get the answers, which will hopefully be the next meeting. Do you like, there's no debate on a deferral. Councillor Decker, do you want to defer this?
Yes.
Okay, I have a deferral motion on the floor that we defer this till we get further information. There's no debate on a deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry.
Can you ask Richard if clear on what he's supposed to report?
Richard, do you understand? You know what they're looking for?
Yeah, I understand you want me to look at the DC exemption for market units, and I also understand you want me to look at the
brownfield,
the brownfield exemptions for payment of taxes or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Okay. So now, where are we going? Are we going back to here?
We'll do those ones. Let's do council committee boards.
Okay, we're going to move back into regular council, and we're going to do council committee and board meeting minutes, number 17, Councillor Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Neal, that council receive and file the minutes of the committees of council, local boards as presented.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we're going into bylaws. We're going to go into bylaws because somebody want to have a discussion on this.
It starts at 146.
Okay.
146 to 140.
We'll do these one at a time then.
Are you passing them now? Or are you going to remove them from the block and pass them?
Yes.
Okay.
One each.
No, just do all four at once.
What ones?
Want me to speak to it?
Yeah, go ahead. I want to make sure we get this right.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor, our chief building official is going to provide an overview of the changes made to bylaws number 146 through to 149. Once that overview is complete, we'll vote on passing those bylaws, and then once we're done in camera, we'll pass the balance of the bylaws in one single motion.
Okay, is everybody good with that? Because this, there some people want a clarification on these, okay? Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Can I ask that bylaw 149-219 be taken out of what you just suggested? Because I'd like to ask a question on that, or can I at the time?
Oh, you can on when we're discussing.
Okay,
these.
thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
So I'll ask, first, before we go through them, I'm going to turn this over to, go ahead.
I understand we're not doing number 11, the bylaw 156-219.
That's correct. 156 has been pulled.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Did you want to speak? I'm going to turn this over to our chief building official, Jason Simpson, to speak on these four bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first one being bylaw number 146-2019. This bylaw is just a bylaw to repeal our current clean yards bylaw, number 121-2007. The purpose for this new bylaw is to clean up a lot of the wording from the old bylaw that created a lot of concerns with bylaw enforcement, where they weren't able to enforce certain aspects or certain issues that arose. So we went through this process of rewriting the bylaw. Most of it remains similar or the same, but to clean up a lot of the wordings to allow enforcement of the clean yards bylaw more efficiently and more effectively.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Jason, I didn't notice, and maybe this is a separate bylaw, but in our other committee where we talked about people being able to request, I forget the wording that we gave, but some time to deal with the issue, especially when it came with tenants. Should that go in this bylaw, or is that a separate policy that you're going to have internally follow?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that would be an internal policy situation, not within the bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this second bylaw, bylaw number 147-2019, is the only new bylaw being presented. This bylaw is a bylaw to allow bylaw enforcement to ticket for parking on yards, whereas the city does not have the ability to do so currently. So this bylaw will allow bylaw officers to actually issue a ticket for parking on front lawns or side yards.
Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
Why are you doing that, Jason? I'm only asking because I do park on my lawn in the summer because we don't have any shade except under our tree, and sometimes we have to move our car to the side of the house.
Through Mr. Mayor, so there has been a very large uproar from the public that they do not like the vehicles parked on the lawns. Our current parking bylaw does prohibit it, as well as our zoning bylaw prohibits it without any enforcement mechanisms. So this bylaw allows for us to provide enforcement of provisions that we've already put in place without those enforcement provisions.
Yeah, so right now, you're not allowed to do that right now. It's just that now there'll be a fine attached to it. And if you live down in, especially in some of the areas in South Confederation, there's a public outcry because cars are parked on front grasses, and it's the neighbors get very upset, like chief building officials talking.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add to that. We do get a large number of complaints regarding this, and it really, up to this point, it's just been conversations that the bylaw officers have been able to have with the owners of the vehicles to ask them to remove it. But if they refuse to remove it, it would mean that the city would have to take them to court and through a long, drawn-out, very expensive process in order to get any sort of enforcement on it. This mechanism will allow us to actually just simply issue a ticket.
Okay, is that clear for everyone? Okay, we're going to move on to bylaw 148-219, bylaw to establish a system of administrative penalties, if you want to explain that one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a bylaw that was, in a way, recommended by council back in May of this year. May 21st of 2019, council approved recommendations from a report. At that time, the report was primarily focused on residential rental licensing and implementing an enforcement mechanism for that outside of the court system. But within that report, a recommendation was that we review the possibility of including a lot more of our bylaws into the same administrative penalty system. So this administrative penalty bylaw before you, bylaw 148-2019, will incorporate a number of bylaws that the city currently has, including the other three that are before you tonight, to allow tickets to be issued for bylaw infractions, so that for those designated bylaws, without having to take people to court, which can be a very long and drawn out and expensive process for the city, and the city sees very little return with those fines because it all goes to the region, the fines, and we just receive a small portion. By implementing this bylaw, it will also, by enabling the bylaw officers to fine individuals who are in non-compliance with our bylaws, it can help. The city will collect 100% of those administrative penalties, which can help offset the cost of bylaw enforcement moving forward. And in addition to all that, this bylaw also merges together our current administrative monetary penalty bylaw, which only covers parking, to allow us to issue parking tickets, as well as the bylaw that we currently have to appoint a hearing officer and screening officer. So this wraps everything all together into one bylaw.
Okay, is everybody good with that? Okay, let's move.
Victoria has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead. And then, do you want to speak, Councillor Long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just curious, does this make the overall fine higher for the individual, or only if they don't pay and we have to take it further?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the overall fine doesn't change. There were some fines for some infractions on the outdated bylaws that we did increase. to better reflect the nature of the infraction, where safety concerns were in place, such as parking blocking a fire hydrant. We increased that fine from, I believe it was around a $30 fine currently, to a more significant fine of, I believe, $75. I don't recall all the ones that increased. There weren't many, but only the ones that were more of a life safety issue. We did look at increasing slightly. Other than that, the fines would remain the same. Some of the fines that were in here are fines that didn't exist prior to this, and our only mechanism was going through the courts, and the court would have to impose a fine of some form. Where in those situations, the city is losing a significant amount of money. The only time that fines would increase potentially from what's in the Schedule A here of this bylaw is if they do not pay those fines and they do not challenge the ticket through the screening process and the hearing process that's available to them, then they could be there could be additional administrative fees added on to that.
Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jason. Jason, I'm just looking at the, there must be new fines for residential rental licensing. These would all be brand new.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Currently, we do not have any fine structure in the residential rental licensing bylaw, which meant that anyone who is in violation of that bylaw, we would have to go through courts, and as mentioned earlier, that's a very long and expensive process for the city.
Okay.
So this will allow us to issue tickets to people who are in violation of that bylaw. We still have the options of proceeding with the current format of going through Provincial Offences Act and going through the court system, but this is an extra tool for the officers to use.
And I'm just wondering how we came up with the set penalty amount. How was that determined?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this set penalty amount, I believe, is $500. That is an amount that previous individuals in my position had approached the Attorney General back when the residential rental licensing bylaw was implemented. The Attorney General had approved these fines for the residential rental licensing bylaw. However, it was never put into place in the bylaw. So I just followed along with those fines that were already approved by the Attorney General.
So it would be a safe amount to go with, I guess, right?
In my opinion, yes. That's the reason why I stuck with that.
Can you refresh my memory on what the cost for the initial residential rental license is? Is that $4?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the initial fee for a residential rental license first time is $500, and that's for a period of 2 years. Any renewals is a cost of $400, again, for a 2-year renewal.
Okay, so we've been kind of lenient for the first 2 years, I guess, and given people ample time. So if somebody doesn't have a license now, they could expect, and not that I want to see anybody fined, but they can expect a $500 fine and then also pay the license fee to be compliant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. However, the fines for most of these bylaws won't be the first initiation or the first step in the process. For the majority of these bylaws, with the exception of the parking-related bylaws, there will be notices given to people who are in violation of the bylaws to give them a chance to come into compliance. And should they not come into compliance within that time frame outlined within the notice, then they would be subjected to these fines.
Okay, do you have any idea what that time frame would be at this point? Or are you still working on that?
At this point in time, we haven't set it in stone yet. If we're talking specific to, it'll be different for each bylaw, but for the residential rental license bylaw, I believe we had considered the timeframe of 30 days, but again, that hasn't been set in stone yet.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one more, in looking at this, again, I read it differently, but when I look at, for example, the rental licensing fines, am I right in reading this that they could get fined for multiple areas on here? So anything that applies? So it's not just a $500 fine, it could be 1,000 or more? Because it says above it for each offense. So they could be carrying out a residential rental business, they could be permitting a person to carry on a residential rental business, they could collect rent or permit rent to be collected, so there could be multiple fines within one situation?
Through Mr. Mayor, potentially, yes. Again, that would be at the discretion of the officer. The point of having these fines isn't to bankrupt people. It is just to promote compliance. So would we issue multiple $500 tickets to one individual? That's very unlikely. It's more likely that we would pick out which ones we felt were most appropriate. However, if we felt it was needed, then we would have the opportunity to issue multiple fines to one individual.
So if somebody applied and wasn't in compliance, then they could then, and still continue to rent. So let's say there's somebody that's renting out space now. They apply, they're not in compliance, you could then, and they continue to rent, they could then be charged for $500 for that under 3.2, and then also for collecting rent under 3.13. Like, it really all could be applicable. I just think it's, I don't know, maybe worrisome. Maybe some, if they're really trying not to comply, would, I don't want to say deserving of that, but maybe you have to, I don't know. I just think because the other committee we sit on, we see all these examples of how things haven't gone right on both, the residents' part and the city's part where the communication lacked or something. I just hate to see somebody sitting in front of us having a $2,500 fine in front of them for the same occurrence. That's my concern. Coming to council.
Yeah, again, that goes to a screening anyways. There's a hearing officer. The system is that if you have a ticket and you don't like the ticket, you have a screening officer, and they sit. It's like the tribunal that you sit on here, except in this case with tickets, it doesn't come to council. It goes to the screening officer, and they make that decision moving forward. In that case, where you have somebody that is put in for a license and they didn't comply, our building department gives them a period of time to comply. Then they go back, and if they haven't complied by that time, then he has other tools in his basket. But if they comply and they come in and do the inspection, he says, okay, you got X amount of time to come up to compliance, then they go back and inspect. They got to be up to that standard then. Because if you don't do that, then the person's never going to come into compliance. That's the reasoning that process is there. Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question on the fee. So for your first time fee, it's $400. When you own properties and you have to pay as a landlord, you pay $400 for your license, and that's only good for 2 years. Then you have to pay $400 again. Like, is that not steep?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so it's $500 for the initial application, and that is for your license for a period of 2 years, so $250 per year. I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but are you implying that the $500 fines are steep?
No, not the fines.
Oh.
But that's not an issue that we're dealing with here. This is just dealing with fines.
So this is just a fine.
Yeah, the issue in that bylaw is separate. But the reason that those fees came about is that was to recoup the costs it took to run the program, so that that program wasn't on the back of the taxpayer. That was the reasoning why those fee structures come up, the original fees. Go ahead, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, so if you look at it from that standpoint, $500 for 24 months, it comes out to be about $20.83 for the first 2 years, and after that is $16.67. So it's not steep. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on that? Okay, so you want to do these four by law?
149.
What's that?
149 assessment.
Oh, 149, being a bylaw to regulate and designate accessible parking in the city of Thorold. And I'll let you go explain that one, and then I knew Councillor Kenny wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So bylaw 149, 2019 is a bylaw to replace and repeal our current accessible parking bylaw number 17-2003. The primary purpose of this bylaw is to remove any discrepancies or conflicts between our current accessible parking bylaw and our new comprehensive zoning bylaw, as well as AODA standards. Our current bylaw did not comply with met the same requirements, so we didn't want one bylaw conflicting with another bylaw.
So Kenny, did you have a question on that?
Yes, not on the particular bylaw, but the parking passes themselves, the accessible parking spots that they're using, are they issued by the region, the province, or by the city?
The permits, the accessibility permits are issued by the province.
Okay, well, I don't know if this is the place, but I'd like to get something going. I don't know if we have to ask staff to, like, these are issued to people and not the car. I had this past summer, somebody at Beechwood actually parked in the accessible spot, golfed 18 holes, put his clubs in his trunk, and got in his car. And so I walked over it, and I said something to him, and all he did was, never even said a word. He just pointed at the sticker in his car. He had a parking pass. I don't know if it was his or how he got it or whatever. Is there any way that we can either approach the province or something, or send a letter like some of the other cities have done, and get these passes so that they're issued to the person themselves? And if the person themselves is not in the car at the particular place, then they can't. Example, a grocery store. If you're not driving the person that's not supposed to be parking there, then he can't park there just because he's got the pass. So is there a process that we can go through as a city to send somebody a letter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that actually already is the legislation. It is issued to the person, not the vehicle. So if somebody is driving a vehicle who the accessibility permit was not issued to, and they're using it, that is a violation. And not only a provincial legislation, but it would be a violation of this bylaw before you today, in which point, under the AMPS bylaw that we just spoke about, we would be able to issue that person a $300 ticket.
Okay.
So their name is actually printed on the ticket then, or on this paper?
Through you, Mr. Worship, or Mr. Mayor, I don't know if the actual name is issued on the permit or not.
Go ahead,
Actually answer that. It is on the permit, so you could, I believe, I'm not sure, but I would think that our law enforcement could ask to, or our bylaw department could ask to see that instead of them just pointing at it. And if, the name's Mary Jane and he says his name is Bob, then you could go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mary, yes, if the name is on the permit itself, when an officer saw that name, the officer could ask for identification. If the individual refuses to provide identification, we could get the police involved and also charge them for obstruction in addition to that.
Okay. Any further questions on those four? Okay, then I'm going to have the clerk, Donna, bring them forward as a separate motion, and we'll pass these, then we'll go into in-camera and come back out and finish the bylaw.
Okay, so can I get a mover for bylaws 146 through 149?
Get a mover? Councillor DeRose.
So that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws. And the same now be read a first time.
Myself, seconded by Councilor Longo, that need to introduce the following bylaws: 146-2000, 147-2019, 148-2019, 49-2019.
That's it, yeah. And they may be read a first time.
Yep.
Okay?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Longo. Bylaw just read a first time, you read a second time, and a third time, you did pass. Mayor and Clerk, you sign and seal. Same, any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Did we do that twice? He did. The first time and the second? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to go to our in-camera session. In accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act, a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is about proposed acquisition of land, personnel matter, and litigation before an administrative board. Could I have a motion to move into closed session to discuss, 1, the CAO's verbal report on fire station lands, potential acquisition of lands; number 2, CAO's verbal report, Director of Planning and Development Services, personnel matter; and number 3, CAO's verbal report, development charges, LPAT appeal, litigation, including matters before administrative tribunal. Can I have a motion to go in camera? Councillor Decker? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we go in camera, and then we'll come out and do the other bylaws, and that's it. And staff,